Hi everyone, Mr. Lee here. Today I would like to talk about marriage laws and how this could affect your decision to emigrate to another country. When we marry somebody, we expect the marriage to last a lifetime. But unfortunately, in recent years, the number of divorce cases has been rising steadily all over the world. The statistics from this video come from the OECD and Eurostats. So first, let's look at the rate of divorce in various OECD countries. In USA, it's 44%. In Germany, the UK and New Zealand, it's 42%. And in Australia and Canada, it's 38%. So if you live in any of these countries, the chances of you going through a divorce stands at roughly 40%. Now let's look at the most cited reason for going through a divorce. 44% of all divorces occur because the couple grew apart. In other words, they became incompatible as time went on. When you marry someone, you may not know his or her character completely, and besides, people do change over time. This makes marriage a big risk. In fact, it's a bigger risk than buying Bitcoin or stocks and shares. The biggest headache pertaining to a divorce is financial settlement. Apart from potential financial losses, you will end up feeling bitter after the whole experience. So my video is about helping you avoid these headaches. In places like Hong Kong, the wife is entitled to half the couple's assets when divorce takes place. In addition, the courts also want to ensure that both parties have a roof over their heads. That means that if you happen to be a wealthy person, but your spouse is from a poorer background, you could lose substantially in the event of a divorce. Some people avoid a divorce because the financial penalty is simply too great. I know some people who are in unhappy marriages and they choose to have extramarital affairs instead. Now you could argue that we could all sign prenuptial agreements prior to the marriage, but then that's tantamount to saying that you don't trust the other party or you are not committed to the marriage. And besides, not everyone agrees that prenuptial agreements hold up in court. So what I am about to talk about is how you could protect yourself. If you were to ask people on the streets, which country would you like to migrate to? They would probably name English-speaking countries such as the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand and the UK. They may even name a European country such as Germany. But these are the countries which are suffering from a high divorce rate. And if you do have some assets and you marry in these countries, then you could lose substantially in the event of a divorce. So I recommend that you go to a country where you have no assets and you marry a local, and then there will be no risk. Let me give you an example of how you could protect your assets and marry at the same time. Let's assume that you have 40 million Hong Kong dollars. That's about 4 million pounds. Let's assume that you have 20 million Hong Kong dollars in Hong Kong and you have the remaining 20 million Hong Kong dollars in the UK. So what you could do is go to a country such as Thailand, Cambodia and Vietnam and find a spouse. You don't need to tell them how much money you've got. You don't even need to tell them where you live or where your house is. So in case the relationship turns sour, all you need to do is say goodbye. I know a friend who is married to a Thai woman and he's living in Thailand right now. His wife doesn't know where his house is, where he originally came from. Supposing that you do have 40 million Hong Kong dollars in real estate, you earn 1.2 million Hong Kong dollars per year from rental income, which is about £120,000. You also get an additional 1.2 million Hong Kong dollars because the price of your property is rising every single year. So it's very easy to support a spouse who is from Thailand, Cambodia or Vietnam. But what if you are already in a happy marriage and you're not going to divorce, but at the same time you have a substantial amount of assets? Well, in this case, you would probably want your children to protect these assets. I am assuming that these assets are in Western countries, such as the US, Canada, the UK, Germany, Australia, or New Zealand. So you could actually raise your children in a country such as Thailand, Cambodia, or Vietnam, because when they grow up, they will be able to marry one of the locals. But at the same time, the assets are protected because they are in Western countries. And what's more, if you are receiving rental income, then the assets are growing over time and no one will be able to take this away from your children. I don't think I will be sending my children to the UK for an education. I truly believe that Western countries such as the US and the UK, Australia, are safe places to invest your money. However, I think that the marriage laws in these countries are a bit unfair. In developed countries, people have never experienced economic hardships. In fact, they are so used to having choices since they were young. That means that if you upset them, they will leave you. However, in developing countries such as Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam, they have experienced poverty before. And in these countries, so long as you're committed to the marriage and you are financially stable and there is sexual fidelity in the marriage, I believe that the marriage should be everlasting. If you are interested in living in Thailand, Cambodia, or Vietnam, I can tell you that Cambodia is by far the easiest country to secure a residential visa. The next easiest country would be Thailand. I would like to conclude this video by going over some of the main points. The rate of divorce in most OECD countries is around 40%. So if you marry in a OECD country, the chances of divorce is quite high. And in addition, if you are somebody who has some financial assets, then if you marry in an OECD country and your spouse is from a poorer background, then you could lose substantially in the event of a divorce. You could avoid the divorce by having affairs. You can't really sign a prenuptial agreement because that makes it look like you don't trust your partner. One way to avoid all this is to go to a country where you have no assets, for example, Thailand, Cambodia, or Vietnam. But you could also choose other less developed countries. And if you go to these countries, you don't need to tell your partner how much money you have. You also don't need to tell them where you come from, where your house is. So long as you have some money to support them, then everything will be fine. And in case you don't get on well with them, well, then all you need to do is say goodbye, and that's the end of the story. Okay, thanks for watching my video. If you have any comments, please leave them below.